Okay, Patrick, what movie did we just go see relatively
Oh,
recently?
Taylor Swift, The Eras Tour, the movie. Oh my God. Go see it. Just kidding. I did see that this weekend. I spent a lot of time in the movie theater this weekend. But we also saw a little movie by a relatively amateurish filmmaker by the name of Martin Scorsese.
Downright mediocre,
Um,
if you ask me.
some say, some
He's
say.
not that good, and honestly, where does he even get off?
Where
Like,
does he get off?
pretending. Like, what is
He's
his stop?
he's on a really high horse. It's very tall. How's he gonna
Dude,
get
he's
down? He's
blown
just a short
so
little
much smoke
Italian.
into that horse's face. I've seen him inject things into its veins. That's a very high horse.
Oh man, ivermectin.
Dude,
That's crazy. Anyway, all this is to say, we saw Killers of the Flower Moon this weekend, and we're here to talk about it. Yeah,
I have to switch the
you.
sides our cameras are on. Because
Oh,
otherwise I'm just looking to the side. But look, now I'm looking at you.
you're
It's
looking at
all
me.
about perspective.
All about
Ba
perspective.
ba 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 ba. Anyway, yeah, we went to go see Killers of the Flower Moon.
Sure
If
did.
there's one thing I love, it's a slow burn. Like I love, fuck Lord of the Rings, classic case in point. I want to sit there, I want to like be entertained for the next 4 hours. You got the Sting, you got Usual Suspects. I don't need an action-packed movie. Give me like 2 hours of next to nothing, and then like last hour and a half of really just ramped up shiznat.
Yeah.
This
Yeah,
movie
that's
was
that's
too
what this
slow of a
movie is.
burn for me. I am the man who will
Whoa.
watch all of Lord of the Rings in one day. This movie was too slow of a burn. Oh my god.
That's
And that I get it's based off a true story, but it doesn't even like pick up speed in the end. It's like it continues at its same pace and eventually comes to an end.
I really like this movie.
It wasn't like I don't want to sound like it was a bad movie. It was acting was great, writing great, story great, shooting, camera, directing all great. It was just so slow for so long. And again, I know it's based off a true story and I don't expect them to have a big battle at the end of the movie, but it felt like one scene led to the next, but the first scene didn't lead to the last scene. Like it was all just a bunch of separate scenes tied together with no overarching connection besides they logically follow the one before them. But like, I don't know how to describe it. It didn't satisfy me in terms of plot or direction. But like again, it was a pretty okay movie. If it was 2 hours, two and a half, I'd probably watch it again. The fact that it's so long and slow, I just don't intend to see this again.
All right. Time for me to step up. So I went into this movie. I tried to go in with a more positive headspace. I was like not looking forward to a 3.5 hour movie. I saw The Irishman when it came out on Netflix. Bored to tears with that. I at the end of the day think that's a good movie, but it took me forever to get through it. Two sittings. And I think I had a much better experience with this movie. I was definitely checking my watch throughout the movie,
Mm.
but I was never as bored as I thought it would be. And I'm really impressed by that. I think I'm going to disagree with you to an extent that the pacing was actually pretty good. I think it's a lot of it is due to the editing, a lot of it is due to the soundtrack playing across multiple scenes. I thought that was an interesting choice, and I'm a sucker for like 1920s flapper era, prohibition era um, vibes, and that's here plenty. It's a classic Scorsese, um, criminal who done it, not a who done it, but like a it's and I know this is kind of a tasteless
It's
comparison, but
literally not a
it's
who it. Like the entire time,
no,
you
I
know
no, I
who's
said it was.
actively doing it.
I said it
It's like a
wasn't. It was a
they
bad
done it.
comparison. It was I kind of it's a bit of a tasteless comparison, but I almost compared it to Goodfellas, but taking place with live real events and with the Osage tribe, and it feels a lot like you're watching these people do these horrible and atrocious things, and you just see kind of how they get away with it for so long until they don't.
Hmm.
And I think on paper that doesn't sound like a very good movie, especially when you're considering that you're following the villains for the entire movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that Leo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro do a good job portraying their characters. I think while at the end of the day, Ernest Burkhart is a man that is terrible and did awful, terrible things, I think there is some complexity to him. He's not just straight up evil. Uh, you see him genuinely fall in love with Molly. You see him throughout the movie just kind of like feel. You don't see him feel conflicted until you get close to the end. And then you see him break when he, oh, full spoilers for real events that actually happen. So don't get your panties in a twist. Um,
Is it spoilers if they're real events that actually happened? Like, can you spoil reality?
well, and we'll get to that because I think that
Spoiler
there's
alert,
a part of
A2
this
Brute.
A2 Brute, spoiler alert, he makes up an atom bomb. Um, but he gets news that his daughter's died of a sickness while he's in jail, ready to testify. You see him just break down. You even see De Niro, break his shell a little bit and just kind of like try to be there for his nephew. And while ultimately Ernest is a terrible person, and I think Leo does a good job portraying that. I think he also does a good job portraying his conflict of interest, and you see him falter towards the end. And while ultimately I think he does get what he deserved by going to prison, I think maybe he got off a little too late. Who knows? But and it's not just him. I could think you could say that about his wife Molly. While she tries to love him, and yeah, I think she does truly love him for a big portion of this movie. You see especially during that last scene they have together where she asks him what he was injecting her with, and she just kind of gets up and leaves. Like she's been trying to, blindly ignore what he's been doing and killing her family, and she just kind of has enough. And I think there's an interview somewhere where Scorsese says that a lot of this movie is about love, and with the focus on Molly and Ernest Burkhart as their relationship kind of unfolds, you kind of see a little bit of that, but it also works as a showcase, not a showcase, as a depiction of something that actually happened and was actually headline material that never gets taught at schools. Much like another event that's mentioned in these movies, the Tulsa Massacre. And I think it's been fascinating to me just in the time since I've watched this movie how much it does right by the Osage tribe, and listening to different indigenous peoples that have seen this movie, they all agree that it does right by them. It does everything it does with respect, but it's not made for them. It's it's coming from an acclaimed film creator by the name of Martin Scorsese. He even takes the stage at the end of this movie to say, tell us the ultimate fate of what happens to Molly and how she lives the rest of her life married to someone else and then dies from her diabetes. And I think it's because it's a story that's he's passionate about and wants to spread the word on it because it's like I said, not many schools teach this. This was certainly my first exposure to it, and I'm not afraid to admit that. And it's an important story to learn, and it's kind of shows just how much bad can be done when we're complicit to people like Robert De Niro's character in this movie, where you just kind of turn a blind eye or even help in committing atrocious acts such as this. But all this to say is I really like this movie. I think for as long as it is, I didn't feel it too much. Maybe a little bit towards the end because there is a little bit of a shift in the pacing towards the end once the FBI gets involved. Um, but I do think that for as serious and dire as it is, there are still some moments of levity and some moments that definitely got my theater laughing. I think the performances from the three leads. I'm blanking on her name. I'm gonna look her up right now. Whoever played Molly, she killed it. She was my favorite
Mm-hmm.
performance the entire movie. Uh,
100%.
Leo also killed it. I think he's probably the weaker of the leads, but of course, it goes without saying, De Niro crushed it.
Yeah.
He's like 80 years old or something. Like he's just so in his Duffy in this movie. It's incredible.
I think part of what really killed this movie for me is my theater was just full of assholes. Just a
Mm,
bunch of oh my god, just speaking the whole time across the theater. I'm not sitting next to these people, just he's the bad guy, and it's just De Niro on screen. I'm doing the accent, but this is how they sounded. In
Yeah, I believe
what?
it.
She just died, and Molly did not just die. This was like halfway through the movie. They're like, she's
Mm-hmm.
dead, and then later the FBI shows up, and they're like, who's them? And they're on their phones, and every time anything happens, they're
Mm,
reacting to it. And that I will admit, I don't blame the movie for that, but that soured the
yeah,
experience.
no, that's fair.
Um,
I get it.
but like even looking past all that, I wasn't on my phone playing games or anything, but I specifically sat in the back row in the corner so I don't disturb anyone. But I could text Mandy real quick or check see, oh, who's that actor?
Hmm.
What else has he been in? Stuff like that. And I'm usually not on my phone at all in a movie, and this time I was on my phone a fairly good bit. And again, it's not a
Hmm.
bad story. It's definitely like you said. We don't learn about this in schools, and maybe we don't need to learn about this specifically, but we could certainly cover all the shady things and all the genocide that went on in those early years. But we don't cover Tulsa either, and again, while these are valuable things, we should definitely that warrant learning. I didn't really, how do I say this? I don't know. The story didn't resonate with me. I feel bad. I definitely didn't take part in any genocide, but I can't help but feel some kind of generational guilt for it. I'm not
Hmm.
upset these stories are being brought to light, and again brought to light in a very tasteful way. This wasn't making light of it. This wasn't saying, oh, but they were sympathetic. It definitely it tells the story in a very adult fashion. But I don't know. The execution just didn't come together for me.
Yeah,
It didn't
interesting.
resonate, and while it wasn't bad and it's definitely something that warrants learning about, I feel like I don't know, I could have learned about this better on like I don't know, maybe like a Nova special or one of those man, I don't even know the names of like the DVDs we used to watch in history class about colonial America. Like an entire episode on this would have been cool. Don't know that we
Hmm.
needed 3.5 hours.
That's so interesting because I think there are plenty of things I could probably point out and take out of this movie. I think you changed the movie pretty substantially if you take out any of the scenes in here. So I've been walking a fine line of could we have cut this down? We probably could have, but I don't know if it would have worked as well.
See,
You know,
like for what
it's
they
interesting.
did, they accomplished it well. For the movie they set out to make, they made spot on. I just don't know that they needed to make this version of the movie. Like for what it was, you're right. Every shot was necessary, every scene was in there. But if we just changed the telling a little bit and just kind of fast track, like, did we need to see Blackie getting arrested? Couldn't we have just explained that he stole the car and it went wrong? Or I don't know, all the stuff with like Joe, the guy who found the other, that was Joe, right? Like
For
the
there were a
guy
lot
who
of
did the
names thrown out.
murder. Yeah, there were just a lot of side characters. The one Native American guy who they tried to make it look like a suicide but murdered.
Oh yeah,
Again, not trying to gloss over that part of history, but did we need him? Like in this version of the movie, yes, but if we were making a condensed version, do we need him ever?
it is kind of key to the entire story. Like even outside of the movie, like that is something that was recorded in history and is important to how they tracked everything down. So
And again, I get that, but they could have easily just pointed out all these murders are going on and all the sister murders happen, and at least in terms of the movie that's enough to get the FBI involved. But we spent like an extra 20 minutes on this guy and it just kind of all goes to the same place anyway.
yeah, and I think my argument against that is it's kind of just kind of not rub your face in the atrocities committed in this movie, but it's just kind of to show like De Niro's got an insurance claim on this guy, and he's going to make sure he can claim that. But
Yeah.
then we also got to get this guy off once we reach that certain maturation point. And it's I think a lot. It's something that struck me specifically was just how grounded and real every murder felt. Like it was just like no music, no nothing really. It's just the sound of a gunshot. and it was
And
like a little
again,
real
like
bloody and stuff.
they set out to make that movie you're describing right now, and they nailed it. They made that movie exactly 100%. As a piece of art, there is nothing about this I would change. As a movie, like we could have made it differently, condensed it, and still gotten the same point across. But they didn't make this for entertainment purposes. They didn't make this for fun shits and giggles. They set out to do a cold, hard retelling of this story, and they accomplished it well. They really did. I just don't need to see all of that to walk away feeling the exact same. If I were to see the condensed version of this, I feel like they could have gotten the same, if not possibly a bigger emotional response out of me.
Yeah, and that just might be a difference in opinion at this point because I think a lot of it is
It
pretty
is.
valid to where
Yeah,
everything ends up.
don't disagree.
Um,
I just we're looking at this differently, and I
yeah,
can't
for
stress
sure.
enough. I respect the movie. It's very well acted, shot, directed, written. Like it's all great. It just didn't land with me, and I think it might have if it was an hour, hour and a half shorter.
Hmm. Yeah, I do. For the most part, really do love this movie. I don't know if it's something I'll go back and watch anytime soon because it is 3.5 hours and it is not a light movie. It's pretty heavy. Um, but I do think that if you have the stomach for it and you have 3.5 hours to kill, I do think this is
Mm-hmm.
worth seeing in a movie theater.
Yeah, you should see it at least once. At least
Mm-hmm.
once. If you like it, you can definitely watch it twice. It's not like Boy in the Striped Pajamas where I can't bring myself to watch that twice. But you
Mm-hmm.
should see this at least once, and it's definitely worth that second watch if you're into it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly how I felt coming out of it. Like, I have movies that I'll never watch again for different reasons. It's Hereditary and Grave of the Fireflies. One's tragically depressing, and the other's just terrifying. This rides a line but no, below tragically depressing. It is depressing, but it ends on a light enough note where
Like
the
it,
criminals do
it
get away.
obviously in historical hindsight, it ends in great tragedy. But at least
Hmm.
in the context of the movie, the bad guys go to jail, the good guys win at least for the day. You know.
Yeah, and I think it's really quite interesting the way they decided to cap everything off with that true crime radio show, um, which I got a kick out of. But at the same time, it's also kind of sobering when they read off that while Ernest did go to prison, while Robert De Niro's character did go to prison and was banned from visiting Oklahoma ever again, he still got his way out of prison. He still visited Oklahoma. He still more or less came out okay in the context of in relatively like still wasn't where he was at the start of the movie, and
Nope.
that's for the better. But and then they describe how Lily Gladstone's the actress. I found her name, but Molly died at age 50, and it's kind of a sobering note. But then you cut to a drum circle, and then it zooms out with a beautiful shot of a powwow going on. And it's kind of there to say, hey, this was a lot of really bad stuff. Maybe the bad guys didn't get everything they deserved, but the Osage tribe is still here. There's still We're still here and we're still doing just fine. You know. So as tragic and heavy as a lot of this movie is, it does end on a lighter note, and that's
You know
something that's
what?
kind of stuck with me.
One thing I just need to shout out while I'm here. Again, back to just the obnoxious audience I was seeing this with. My God, they were so happy when, oh, good, they're calling them Indians. Like, yes, they're calling them Indians. It takes place in the 1920s when Native Americans wasn't even a thought on anybody's mind. No, they are not
It's
Indians. They were literally upset that this is a movie that's going to make the white people look bad. I was like, it. What did you
mm,
expect?
mm,
It's a historical piece. It's accurate. It's factual. Like they're not just gonna say, some murders happened and the white guys didn't do it. It was probably the Indians, and the white guys got all the land because they wanted it and deserved it.
mm-hmm.
No, God,
Yeah,
it was
it's
one of the
not.
worst movie going audiences I've ever gone with. Bad people, stupid opinions on everything, could not follow the plot and let me know it.
Yeah. Well, those are the kind of people this movie's made for, and it's unfortunate to hear they didn't quite take it
No,
as
they didn't
Scorsese
like any
intended.
of it, and it was like, man, he held your hand and guided you through it, and didn't even make them look bad. DiCaprio, like you said, not a good guy by any means, but complex. De Niro straight up just actually evil. But all the
Just
FBI
yeah,
agents were white. Well, not all of them, but vast
not all of
majority.
them. Yeah.
Townsfolk were white, and they were, most of them were decent people.
Well,
And then they just couldn't help that the two main bad guys were white, and that's just not okay.
yeah. I mean, a lot of the townspeople were complicit. They just never really focused on that or really outed a lot of them for that.
See,
Um,
and I don't. This is not an excuse to be complicit, but I saw this experiment. It's actually really fun to watch. It was kind of a social experiment where they invited a bunch of people to take a test, except everybody else was a paid actor but one guy. And
mhm.
then, yeah, obviously, in context of the experiment, not doing this for real, started pumping smoke in under the door to make it look like the building was on fire. And all the actors just keep taking the test. The one guy notices the building's on fire, and it was just, you don't want to break the social norm. So since nobody else was
Mm-hmm.
reacting, he chose not to react. So it's not an excuse to be complicit, but it's that thing where, of course, I'd help the man getting run over by a train, but would you? Would you jump
Right.
in?
If nobody else was,
It's easy to look back in hindsight, but yeah, if nobody else was, then you'd probably just go about your merry day too.
yeah, and I think that speaks to, well, that is definitely a factor. I think that also speaks to Robert De Niro's character, William Hale, and just the power he had over the
Mm-hmm.
townspeople like that. That just makes his character is so interesting. Robert De Niro absolutely kills in this movie. I can't
Oh
say
yeah,
that
no,
enough.
great performance for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, man, I don't know what I was gonna say next. Oh, no, that's just a tangent we don't need to go down. But I did like Jesse Plemons in here as Tom White, the lead investigator. He did really well.
He did. He was charming. I liked him.
Brendan Fraser was a little bit much. I was like, we could tone it down just like a skosh, Brendan. But I love you.
Play?
Um, yeah, I don't know.
Oh,
A lot of the cast really knocked it out of the park. I will
really, they
say. I
did.
think
It was a
I
beautiful
think.
portrayal. It was executed perfectly for what they were going for. It just, I don't know, didn't land with me as a person, but I cannot deny it was an objective success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you can, I definitely recommend checking this out in a movie theater. Maybe wait till Taylor Swift hype dies down so you don't get a somber scene and you hear Cruel Summer next door blaring. Um, that didn't happen with me, so to speak, but it might have towards the end. Who knows? Um, but this was absolutely worth sitting down for 3.5 hours. I was honestly engaged for like 90% of this movie, which after coming out of The Irishman with the experience that I had with that movie,
See,
I'm pleasantly surprised by that.
I can't tell you how much more I would have loved this movie if we get to the scene at the end of the movie after DiCaprio's confessed to everything and his wife comes in.
Hmm.
And it's like, how so and so, they're fine. What did you put in my insulin? And he's like, nothing. If
Hmm.
when she got up to leave, I started hearing Bad Blood from the next room over start playing in the background, and she just walks out to that, that's a
No.
power move right there.
That
That's
would have
a
been awesome.
power move.
That would have been awesome for real. One other quick shout out I want to give. Robbie Robertson, who did the music for this, died a couple of months before the film released. Really dug the music, so bummer that he's gone, but I'm glad we at least got this before he passed.
It's
Uh,
always, I don't want to say nice because obviously I don't want anyone to die, but
hmm.
there's something special about seeing somebody's last performance that they got out right before they died. Like the last time Stan Lee makes an appearance.
Right,
And that's
yeah.
the only one coming to mind at the moment. But there's definitely just been actors and
I
actresses who pass away, and you get to see their last thing, and it's them in all their glory. And it's nice to see them give it their all one last time.
hmm. Yeah, yeah. I don't really have much else to say. I've
No,
said my piece.
I've said more than I thought I had to say. So
I knew
kudos
I'd
to
get
me.
something out of you.
You got like 13 minutes out of me.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Honestly, how
Nah, I
much of
really
that was
disagree.
intro with Austin? You got like
That's
11 minutes out of me.
I'll take 11
Yeah,
more
you
than I
will.
thought I'd last. Yeah, I will. All
Anyway,
right.
fellas, we're going to go ahead. We're going to cut the FTP there. Thank you so much for joining. We had a lot of fun talking about Killers of the Flower Moon. If you guys like movie discussions, trailers, things of that nature, go ahead and consider dropping a subscribe. Become a subscribe and dibbler today. We're back here every week talking about movies that are coming out and movies that are coming up. So stay tuned. You're always bound to find something you enjoy. Maybe you like us, maybe you don't, in terms of our opinions. Patrick has a question.
Yeah, I think it's not a question, more a suggestion. If you
Uh
like what
huh.
we do here and you want to keep the conversation going, maybe drop your favorite Martin Scorsese movie in the comments and how you compare this to that.
I like the good pigeons.
Good Pigeons. His best work, some say.
Yeah, no, from Animaniacs, the
Hmm.
good
No, I know
feathers.
what you're the Good
Yeah,
Feathers. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
ba ba ba.